Welcome back to Lead with Bubba Scott. Today, I'm joined by Andrew Little, co-founder of Goldholly, a startup purveying Yaupon holly, the only naturally caffeinated plant native to North America. Andrew's path is a fascinating one, from Brown University to finance and sustainability investing, to walking away from a traditional career track to build something of his own. In this conversation, we talk about purpose, entrepreneurship, sustainability, small team leadership, and what it takes to bet on yourself when the path ahead is uncertain. Let's get it.
Andrew Little of Goldholly. How we doing?
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really looking forward to speaking to you and for the what I'm sure will be an exciting, great conversation.
Yeah, man, we're super excited that you're here. Thanks so much for coming on, and really looking forward to talking about your story leading up to your time starting as a co-founder with Goldholly. So with that, let's just dive right in. Can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing, what it was like for you growing up and where you ended up going to school? And we could talk about your path towards your professional life.
Absolutely. Sort of a roundabout path. You know, I was born in New York City, moved to the UK when I was about 3, lived there for 4.5 years, came back to the States. My parents set up shop for the family in Massachusetts. I consider myself to be a Bostonian. I'm a big time Boston sports fan. I love New England. I feel like New England is sort of the place where you always know you want to go back. You hear people who grew up in other areas and they're always saying, yeah, I'm so glad I'm here. I'm going to stay in San Diego for the rest of my life. I've always known I wanted to go back to New England. I think it's the best place ever. And it really, for me, instilled a lot of the values that I now hold to be really, really important and are close to my heart. I went to high school in Cambridge, Mass. What sports was one of the things that really connected me to New England. So I'm a massive baseball fan. You probably see my old school catcher's glove up there. Chose a great time to become a Red Sox fan in 2004 or 2003. So I was heartbroken in the playoffs then, and then 2004. That was really what brought me in to be a religious, not just baseball fan, but sports fan. And yeah, I fell in love with that. Became really obsessed with statistics and understanding, different outcomes in the game as a result of different actions. And it really it opened my mind up to learning about things in different ways and examining things from different angles. And, when I entered high school, I would, study my butt off. I was a really, really hard worker in high school. And I thank my mom and my dad, and also my grandparents for the values they instilled in me and my parents. Essentially, I entered high school doing the normal things everybody does, but always on the side, I was obsessed with baseball stats, and started to think about, what do I want to do with my life, with my career? So for a long time, I was like, okay, Theo Epstein, that's the dream. Young executive, loves baseball. Everyone, respects all the things he says because he comes in with a very objective, data-driven point of view. And my mom was a, really, really big role model for me. She was one of the first women to go on Wall Street and run an aspect of the business or a facet of the business over there, the sales and trading floor for Merrill Lynch. And so, I just saw how hard she was working, knew I had this love for statistics and trying to, understand what could happen from certain things you could see in data. When I graduated from high school and went to Brown University, I thought, okay, the path is from my mom, and then from my love of stats and the game was, going into finance. I had this traditional path, go to a good school, work really hard, go into finance, and then just sort of work your way up, and that's the rest of your life. But things turned out to be a lot different. Well, leaving college, I went to UBS, did a rotational analyst program, and it's all started really in the department of UBS in Weehawken, New Jersey. I was in Brooklyn at that point, so I would go all the way across Manhattan, get on the ferry, go to Weehawken, and then go and work in my rotational analyst job. I'm really grateful for the roles that I had at UBS at that point in time. But I quickly woke up to the real world. I was in the mortgage department, as I said, and it was a lot of organizing files, scraping numbers from a piece of paper, putting them into a computer. And, you do 4 months of that and you're sort of wondering, okay, this might not be the whole, I don't feel like Theo Epstein of the finance world right now. And I really thank, one of my mentors, James Jack, who was my first boss in the real post-college part of my career. But James Jack, when I entered UBS, just sort of saw that I didn't necessarily understand the reality of what it meant to work in finance. But he gave me, my first review ever on the corporate world. And it was pretty bad. It took a lot of time for me to internalize that in the right way, but came out of it realizing that Jim was just trying to make me better. He saw something in me that he wanted to tap into. And right after that rotation, he and I became really good friends. I would meet with him regularly. He could give me tips. And this is after that terrible review. And he just taught me about leadership, about respect, about being a professional, about hard work. And this guy, he was probably 35 at the time, maybe a little bit younger, but he was in the trenches with all of us, working really late hours with me, and even longer hours than me, which definitely a bad look. So James and I kept meeting, and he, I feel almost a little emotional talking about it, but he shaped my career, gave me the confidence by really framing to me that the criticism he gave me is that he saw something in my work and saw a lot of similarities between our skill sets, the drive and intellectual curiosity. And pretty quickly, as I moved through the rotational program, got a lot better, started performing, pretty highly, stopped wearing suits that didn't really fit. I did right out of college. A lot of guys do the Men's Warehouse. What was it? It was 4 for $7 or 3. You get 3 suits, get 4 free or something ridiculous. But yeah, he was instrumental in helping me just figure out how to navigate that world. And by the end of UBS, I'd done a lot better, made a lot of really good connections there. I also, though, at that time was sort of realizing I'm just pretending everything's baseball stats. And when you're working on something, it's really easy to fall out of love with it and the job if you don't just love what you're doing. And it becomes like a grind rather than just like a nonstop, drive to compete and to do work that means something. So I decided, or I'd really been starting to focus a lot on sustainability, something that had come to mean a lot to me around protecting our natural environments, ecosystems, and natural resources.
Can you talk about what that next step looked like and what kind of work you were doing in finance for sustainability?
Yeah. So placed out of my rotational analyst program at UBS in 2018, maybe the end of 2017. And there were a bunch of options that were on the table. And I was about to potentially leave finance to go into sports analytics to maybe find another path, because I did really well there. And I made a lot of good relationships, but I was starting to feel like a need for purpose. So saw this role for sustainability related investment, which was about looking for different characteristics that could both, drive a positive impact, but on top of that, also help investors express values in their own portfolios, and potentially find alpha or excess return from investing in things that were, topical, and also would drive, long-term benefit to the point where it become a new industry. And then, the idea of being able to mitigate risk in a portfolio by removing exposure to things that could be idiosyncratic. PG&E is always the example I look at. There's the massive wildfires in California in the early 2010s that were started due to, I believe it's campfire, but PG&E's power lines falling down. The aged infrastructure hurts the environment. And then as a result, they had to pay one of the largest fines for a company ever. So yeah, went into that role, really trying to find a way to leverage my finance experience and the performance that I had there to something that also touched on things I cared about. And so was doing sustainability related finance at UBS, and that's how I got into it.
That's awesome. And it's so cool to see that you can take your profession in something like finance. You can absolutely leverage those skills to make an impact in areas that you find valuable. And I think each example that you gave are great. They're all great examples of how you can put your money where your mouth is, and how making decisions that are either good for the environment or good for the people that are working for you or good to the customers that you're working for ultimately end up being good business practices, right? Like, it would have been a lot cheaper if folks had paid to fix their electrical infrastructure prior to the catastrophic failure they had that created the California wildfires. So it's exciting to see that you can take a profession that you're involved in, and without necessarily changing professions, shift your focus to start making an impact in areas that you actually value beyond what you were training in as an analyst. You've been doing this work in sustainability. You've been doing this incredible investing work, and you've been successful, but you decide to pivot away from finance. So can you talk about that decision, and then ultimately what led you down the path you're currently on today?
Absolutely. I think great summation there too. Sustainability, a lot of people think of it as something that it doesn't have to be, where it really is about trying to protect the environment, trying to protect people by making, good business decisions and investing in companies, rewarding them that do that, and also mitigating a risk in your portfolio as a result. So those ideas really became top of my mind as I started to think about the world and decision making. You can not only can a business make decisions to, reduce its risk, positive impact, and also potentially a long-term return, a human being can do that too. So I worked at UBS, moved over to BlackRock, which I would say was sort of the pinnacle culmination of my finance career, with a lot of the same focus, looking at sustainability related investments. Healthcare as well became a part of it. I got really into biotech for some reason also. So sort of had two random, totally different hats, but worked at BlackRock for a year. And really at the end of that I'm someone who really likes to see the tangible results of my work. At BlackRock, made the decision, going to leave finance. It was a very difficult decision because you spend a lot of years working in an industry, and leaving it is scary. And so I left, and sort of, I felt like I had nothing, like it was all gone. Where do I go? What's my path? And so that almost immediately was me moving to a company called Floodlight, which did satellite-based sustainability assessment. So some of that is looking at, air pollution, emissions from oil pipelines, gas pipelines, helping those companies sort of look at their infrastructure, if, there are gas leaks, and then also just for companies that are trying to reduce their carbon imprint on the world. Working there, it was definitely great to be able to start to see that hands-on work, be able to talk directly with leadership at different companies on how they can use sustainability related solutions to improve their companies. So that also included risk, but it was my first time at a small company. I learned a lot about running a business, about what it means to lead. Worked with some great people there as well. Josh Pitts, Suchi Gopal, Nate Wine, and, just decided, I want to be able to run my own shop, try to create a business that I can look back on. Hopefully it's successful, but I can look back on and say, I gave it my best shot. I did something very positive. And I also introduced people to new ideas that, might resonate with them. So that's what drove me to Goldholly.
Yeah. What's pretty interesting to me is the guys I know who work in finance, they work incredibly hard. I think a lot of people, they equate working hard with physical labor or, there's so many different ways that can manifest, but it's certainly the case that people who are working on Wall Street, people who are working in finance, are working incredibly long hours, and they're doing really difficult things. But a couple of things about that, I think what so many people find interesting about finance is you can find this intellectual stimulation that's challenging to find in other places, where you're constantly learning about something new, a new business, something you can invest in. And so that intellectual aspect of it is definitely valuable. But then also that hard work, that difficult intellectual work that you do all the time, you build that skill set. And you talked about stepping away from that and how scary that can be. That really resonates with me as a veteran as well. Someone who worked for 10 years as an officer in the Marines, learning how to fly planes, finally getting to a point where you can safely and to a high degree of excellence manipulate the aircraft and do the things you want to do and lead flights. And then you make this decision to pivot away and you step away from that. And you talked about ego or pride or whatever it is. There's also just a tangible and legitimate sense of loss that part of your identity has been related to, whether it was finance, the military, whatever your profession was. So I think it's really interesting for me to see the parallels to the veteran experience as you've made that transition. And then also I think it's important for everybody to think about when you make a large career change, it's a lot more emotionally challenging than people think. And I think what's really exciting about the way that you did it is you found, you did it for a positive impulse, which was towards something, not necessarily away from something. So having a positive impulse to go get after something, I think, is a lot healthier than just turning your back on something without a purpose. And what's interesting is you were able to dive right in to that new role and kind of explore that space, which for you was really powerful. I think all of that said, one other theme that you talked about was as you got more interested in what you were working on, you got more passionate. As you were passionate, you did a lot better. So I think it's really that's been a theme on the show, is that when you can find excitement in what you're doing or study the thing that you're interested in or get involved in a profession that you're interested in, you're going to do so much better. So I think that aspect of it, that you were able to pivot within finance to focus on things you found interesting, helped you excel and do well, so that as you made that transition, you were in an athletic stance to take the baton and keep running, as opposed to, if you get overly negative about your current role, that can really bite you in the butt as you go to make that transition. And you did that pivot not once, but twice. So we talked about the challenges associated with switching professions, but now we're going to talk about the challenges associated with not just switching professions, but switching the concept of employment, wherein you're no longer the person receiving a salary. You're no longer the person with a boss. You're the one taking on all the risks. When you start talking about entrepreneurs, you start talking about buying businesses. You're now on the hook financially. Your livelihood is tied to it. It's a completely different game. So we talked about that transition, that it can be scary as you change careers. I'd be very interested in talking about making that decision to bet on yourself and to get after it. So I think a good way to start with that is, can you just talk about how Goldholly began and how you guys came up with the idea? What got you excited enough to step away and get after it?
So I'm the founder of Goldholly, which is a functional beverage company focused on America's only caffeinated plant, Yaupon Holly. Drinking some of it right now. It's fantastic. I can tell you some of the things about it in a little. For years, I had been, you point, as you said, if you're on Wall Street, it's maybe not a physical task, but it's definitely an exhausting one. You're working pretty late hours, and ultimately you're responsible for people's money, and the work has to reflect that. You have to work diligently, work extremely hard, so that you know that you're making the best decision possible, or that you're capable of making. So how did I do that? I drank a lot of Red Bull, which was not good for me, which was not good for really anybody. There are a lot of chemicals, a lot of caffeine. People don't realize that even though it has maybe less than a cup of coffee, or around the same, I think it's like 80 something milligrams. It also has taurine, which changes how your body processes caffeine and has other impacts on your body. And so I was drinking a ton of Red Bull. My really good friend, who's now my co-founder, Liam Trotza, he lived in New York. We sat next to each other first day of Brown, actually, in Chinese class, believe it or not. So we were good buddies throughout all of college. In our relationship period, lived in New York. I was working at JetBlue, doing route planning and pricing, a lot of the logistical work for a portion of the country. We played board games almost every weekend. So Sunday, we'd open up Catan or Risk. The game, I think that when I first got introduced to Yaupon was Wingspan, which is a game about birds. It's awesome. It doesn't sound like it's awesome. It's a game about like birds. I swear to God. Brought this pitcher of this golden, beautiful liquid out of his fridge and just poured me a glass. It was like, dude, you got to stop drinking Red Bull. It's killing you. Because at that point, I'm drinking on the weekends too. I'm just like, I'm in. And so he poured me this glass of this beautiful golden liquid. This is a darker variety of it. But he, and I would drink it, and it's just so good. Could drink it at like 6 p.m. and then go to bed, the normal time, wake up, go to work. And then very slowly, I started to bring that routine into my everyday. Started to learn a little bit more about this, like what she just said was tea. And, it was something pretty special. Liam had been going to botanical gardens, big sustainable agriculture nerd. And he, was in the back of a botanical garden in Texas and saw a little plant in the back corner with a plaque that said Yaupon Holly, North America's only native caffeinated plant. And so when he told me that after a few times of me enjoying it, something sort of in my head went off. How in the heck does nobody know about this? We've all heard about coffee, tea. There's synthetic caffeine, synthetic energy, but and even like yerba mate in South America, all caffeine sources that are popular around the world. Recently learned yerba mate is like huge in Syria, which is a very strange thing. It's from Argentina, but
oh, wow.
Yeah, it's big over there. But everyone knows all about all these caffeine sources. Nobody knows about Yaupon Holly. A only caffeinated plant native North America. Liam started to tell me, it's the North American cousin of yerba mate. Right at that time, we had just started seeing Guayaquil, now branded yerba madre. The yellow can you'll see in stores that say yerba mate, popping up everywhere. People love Guayaquil or yerba madre. And these native plants, when you grow them, are so good for the environment because it's where they're from. They're built for the conditions there. They're drought resilient. They have a lot of other positive attributes around ecosystem biodiversity because they're native to the ecosystem. All the animals that are local there, and then all the farmers too, are impacted by it, introducing a new plant. It's really, really positive. Liam introduced me to that. We both started thinking the only of anything is worth something, and did a lot of research, learned that there's an 8,000 year consumption history around that, got really into the deep cultural history of it with Native Americans and indigenous peoples, long cherished plant used for fueling up before long hunts, long travel in community settings for social lubricant, things like that, where it just was used for so long and then suddenly 1600. And so we were like, okay, there's got to be something here. It was right in between Floodlight, BlackRock at that time. We just continued, played board games, drinking Yaupon. I didn't really think anything of it. Ian left his job and started to cook on some ideas. And I was at Floodlight. And then, I realized I wanted to start my own thing at the end of Floodlight. Liam had started to really investigate and work on the idea of a company focused on Yaupon poly. So we were talking about it and did a little bit of, consulting stuff with him as he was trying to figure out what to do. And I fell in love with the idea of the business of really starting a national business focused around this. And, our third co-founder, Jeffrey, graduated from his master's program and he's focused on innovation design. And we sort of thought we have the perfect skill set combined, at least, from an angle of people that aren't already focused on consumer packaged products, but to go ahead and launch this, a brand that's focused on this plant. So that's how I got there. The sustainability stuff was a big part of that, coupled with just the actual genuine need in my life for something that's better.
Yeah, dude, what an awesome story. Born over a board game, which is pretty crazy. I think what's so funny to me as you were talking is that, and we've talked about this before, but sustainability for whatever reason has some loaded political affiliations, which I think is just totally absurd. If you think about it from a business standpoint, and again, this is not the way you should think about it, but if you think about it from a business standpoint, you're talking about a native plant that grows naturally without any assistance, as opposed to any number of plants that we've imported and started growing here. And the amount of legwork required, the amount of logistical nonsense that you have to pay for to generate a crop or, another type of tea, for example, to grow it locally when it doesn't naturally grow here. It's so much more cost effective to work with something that is regenerative and grows naturally here. So it's fascinating to see how sustainability can be such a loaded term when it's better for the environment, which I don't understand why that has a political affiliation is absurd. Like what you talked about growing up in New England, your love of the outdoors. It's absolutely the case. Anybody from my home state of New Hampshire can tell you the beauty of the White Mountains and why would you, obviously we need progress, but we can do it in a way that is not detracting from the environment. But then the second side of it, which is just, it's good business, man. If you have to pay $100,000 to irrigate a crop that doesn't grow naturally in your area, that's $100,000 you don't have to spend if you're growing something that's regenerative and naturally occurring in the environment. So the business sense makes a ton of sense as well.
Absolutely. This plant, it grows everywhere. And to your point, if it's there, it's a resource we have, it's on the land, it's been there forever. It really is a great lens to look at sustainability through. It doesn't have to be, something that's ascribed to you or pushed onto you by by people who aren't even in your life. Why is someone forcing me to make this decision about my own life when may actually have a negative impact? Even if that decision was made for like a sustainability related purpose, it's a lot easier to understand that when it's something like, hey, you can switch to a beverage that just is very similar, perhaps in my biased opinion, a lot better than, what's out there. It can actually have all of this positive impact. I think it's a really good way of looking at sustainability because it's about the actionable choices we make rather than choices that are being forced, onto someone.
Yeah. Not to mention, or just the health aspects of it. If it's basically you're brewing it like a tea, it's naturally occurring. It's more natural for your body to digest it. The juxtaposition of that with Red Bull is wild. And I'm not necessarily trying to hate on Red Bull because everything they do with regard to extreme sports, to include aviation, is fantastic. I would say that, a lot of aircraft that fly in the skies are fueled by maintainers or are maintained by personnel who are running off pure Red Bull. So it definitely serves its place in our society, but it would be pretty cool to not have all the negative health impacts for the folks who are maintaining these things. And of course, I'm thinking about the Marines who are turning wrenches on V-22s. Always my first thought. Maybe we can get them something a little healthier than taurine.
I'd love to send them a bunch of Goldholly if you have a way for me to do that. And also, I love Red Bull too. I got to say that because I don't think I said it when I was in. I still love how it tastes. I really do. To your point, like what a brand.
Yeah,
I'm a big YouTube guy. So much of their content on YouTube, I watch it religiously. So it's hard for me to say that because everyone deserves healthier solutions in their life. It helps to drink something from the land, but to speak poorly of what I think is an awesome brand is not my full intention, but I definitely also do again think they're better consumption options.
Yeah. Well, who knows? Maybe Yaupon will become so popular that you can be paying for an aerial demonstration team yourself in a few years now. So that'd be a good outcome. Cool. So we talked about the story, the genesis, the why. We talked a little bit about the product itself. I would be very interested. You transition out of your previous role. You make a bet on yourself. You and two of your good friends who are both super capable. You believe in them as businessmen, and you feel really strong about the team that you're putting together. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges that you face? Because obviously, you've got three people who like drinking this indigenous, what is effectively indigenous tea. And then now you're selling it. You can get it online. People can buy it. It's in what is effectively tea bags, right? How do you go from sitting around a table playing Settlers of Catan to selling Yaupon Holly via the internet? Can you talk a little bit about the challenges you face?
Yeah. Definitely. It's a great question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is, having spent so much time in finance, I talk to, not so much these days, but when I first started this, like people ask, what are you doing? Or, you're on Wall Street and now you're selling tea. And the answer is, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. So and I think my two co-founders feel a lot of the same too. Liam, his colleagues at JetBlue all support it, but it's a left field move seemingly. Obviously there are like a lot of points and it makes sense when the story is told. But when it came to our team and us deciding, what path to take with the product, how we were going to get it out into the world, how we actually ended up doing that and how we're doing that now, there were a lot of decisions that we made. So first it was really homing in on, okay, what are the value propositions of this plant, of this crop? What resonates with the American public at large? This has to be a product that's, at least right now, focused on just the U.S. market. So we homed in on what we thought were the pretty clear benefits on the function side. There's the caffeine, the Theocrine, which is really cool. This is a hot compound right now that not many people know about. If you listen to Andrew Huberman, you probably heard about Theocrine, but up to this point, there are only like 2 plants on the planet that were known to have Theocrine. Study in 2019 by a scientist by the name of Adam Negrin studied Yaupon and found the presence of Theocrine. It's like a longer lasting caffeine, essentially, that doesn't impact sleep. So you have 30 milligrams of caffeine, Theocrine, a bunch of antioxidants. So you also cover the health side of that as well. No tannins means better digestion. Things that, really everybody who's looking for a healthy product or a different functional solution to get behind. So I check that box. Then there's the sustainability element, which is also just about it being locally grown and native, which I think are things that everybody can get behind around improving our food systems, the growers of the crop, giving them a revenue source by creating a market that wasn't really there. And then on top of that, benefiting the local ecosystems, the environment, reducing shipping emissions, and also giving people access to something that's traceable. It's fully grown, made in the U.S. Every aspect of our supply chain is fully transparent. People know exactly what they're putting into their bodies because It's from American soil, no chemicals, just rainwater and sunshine. So we looked at all of that, decided, okay, how can we get the message out there? One, the best, and two, we're bootstrapping. We don't have outside investment. All of us, committed our own savings to grow the business. How can we get this out there in the best way possible? So it's really hard to educate, because Yaupon, like I didn't even know about Yaupon 3 or 4 years ago. It's really hard to educate in a retail setting if people don't know about it. And so going, digital first, really focusing on the online presence, social media, e-commerce, marketing, all of the different avenues there. Amazon, which is more recent, I guess 6 months ago, where we started doing that. It really made the most sense. And then on top of that, when you're, as I said, bootstrapping, don't really have as many resources as a larger company, which for those that don't know, bootstrapping is like when you start out a company and you just go in with the resources you have, being really, paying a lot of attention to where you're spending the money and just trying to focus on the things you need for growth. We saw that e-commerce is the best for our margin. You think about retail, you have to sell at a 50% wholesale price. Often, if you want to get into a larger retailer, you have to sell through a distributor, which is something I didn't know, but now it makes total sense. Like instead of receiving different boxes at different times of the day from all different brands, like Whole Foods even wouldn't be able to manage that. You buy from like a distributor that stocks your shelves, or two. They're really mainly two in the US, UNFI, Payke. But they take 10% of the margin, or of the total of the retail price. And then, if you're also using a broker, that's another area. So how can you cut out the middlemen while you're small to still get this out of the market while educating people? Just made sense to go e-commerce first. And so we've really been focusing on our website, selling through that, selling through Amazon, and selling through online advertisements to really bring this to people, get it into their daily routines as a part of a ritual. Just as I made a positive choice, what I think is a positive choice to work on something that I feel is impactful on a daily basis from morning till midnight. At this point, hopefully a little bit earlier than midnight. I mean, in a couple of years from now, probably a little more than that, for a little. The consumers can make an active, positive choice by buying this crop, by supporting our business or other brands out there that sell local native crops, that they are actually putting revenue in the hands of U.S. farmers, that they're protecting ecosystems by making that choice. And even if it were like tea that was grown in the U.S., if it's not native, it's not really causing that or resulting in that positive impact. There's a study that shows if you grow tea on non-native land, takes or after 40 years, 0% recovery to its natural state. Yeah, consumers can make actionable choices, but to answer your question in terms of the why, that's why we took the path that we're on right now and are continuing down that path.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many awesome things going on there. Having a great product, being number one, and believing in it, of course, being the generative aspect of it for you guys, like the ability to generate the amount of effort required is that you actually believe in it. But you brought something up that I think is really important. You brought up how access to the market is very difficult when people don't know what you're selling, don't know what the product is. So you're doing e-commerce, but you've got to educate people. You've got to get the word out. But what is so great about this product? So how are you doing that? Because I think what will be really interesting, I'd be very excited to see, people's Instagrams before this episode releases and people's Instagrams accounts after, or their feeds, because I noticed just in a few phone calls, I started getting a lot of really good advertisements on Instagram. So I've been really impressed by that. Can you talk about, why you what decisions are you guys making to get the word out there, and then how you're actually doing that to the extent that you can?
Great question. And it's something that I'm thinking about every single day, which is just an amazing part of starting your business, that you get to think about these things, be creative. I laugh hearing that you're getting those ads, because I handle all of our ads in our campaigns, all of that. How we target, consumers based off of certain things. Not that I can pick like one person. I'm going to start target Bubba with some ads right now. But I've been playing around over the past couple of weeks, so I'm sure you've gotten some diverse content to say the least. I have. Yeah. We're experimenting with some things. But advertising is definitely one way to do that. Organic content too on our different social feeds. Focusing on, at this point in our business, we're really starting to approach this true product market fit that we think we're potentially already have already been there, just trying to really define what that persona is. But yeah, posting content related to the sustainability, the naturalistic angles, the historical elements of it. As I said, 8,000-year history of consumption of this amazing plant, really trying to be stewards of it for a new generation where it deserves, to get the spotlight that it lost back in the second century. So focusing on the history, the function for those that are interested in that aspect of it. But all of these things that are values that people express that we think are aligned with what, who the initial, at least consumers of this plant are going to be, or who already are, because do not want to say that we're like discovering this. This is not, we are bringing a spotlight to a crop that, has a long history of being cherished by indigenous communities. But so there's that. The paid ads that's been a fun one for me. It is a little bit of playing a game and competing every day, trying to figure out what content is resonating, the right structure of that, sequencing ads, gets people interested in it. What's the journey of education that makes someone want to consume this plant, which they may actually already want to, they just don't know it enough about it. So sequencing that messaging in small little bits, and then going out and just, evangelizing it. I do demos at really well-respected natural food stores. Cambridge Naturals in Cambridge, Massachusetts is one of them. They are just an amazing place, amazing team too. Great story, great founders there. And setting up a booth and handing out free cups of tea and telling people the story while they drink it, which, 10 years ago, if you told me I'd be in a natural food store, sitting behind a table with a yellow t-shirt, handing out tea, I would have said, you're nuts. But it's been great doing that, getting out and doing community messaging and in other ways, podcasts, different content. We have a lot of exciting plans though in the future too for that.
Yeah, dude, there's so many takeaways I have from that, but as you described standing at the, giving out free cups of tea in your yellow shirt, I thought back to my oldest sister had an incredible company called Sustainable Snacks, but the amount of work and dedication it takes for entrepreneurs to actually do what you said, which is evangelize the product, is immense. And I remember starting with her first farmers markets, helping her bring a table and a little tent and selling mountain morsels, which was her first product line. And her growth over a long period of time and all the effort that it took. I think from your story, hearing about this transition and just listening to you talk about the work required to get the word out there, it's just so clear for anyone looking to start their own thing that it absolutely can be done. They can be successful just like you guys are right now, but it definitely takes a lot of hard work. And that's where I think that skill set that you learned in finance, like being willing to throw 110 hours at a problem set over a 7-day period, like just knowing that grind and being comfortable in that setting is so powerful. And, not to mention all the understanding the finances associated with running a business. It's such a great place to start as well. I would like to peel back one layer here because I was thinking specifically about, your ad campaigns and how you guys are doing it, because it is so fascinating to me. You talked about bootstrapping, right? And I think a great way to get the word out about Goldholly or any product about which people know nothing would be a 30-second ad during the Super Bowl. That would cost you between $7 and $8 million for 30 seconds. Which I think, for a startup, I don't know where your budget is, but it would certainly feel like an egregious expense if that's something you're going for. So can you talk a little bit about how you're actually executing your ad campaigns, or like the decisions that you're making and where you're actually spending the money and how you're maximizing value?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been so fun working on the meta campaigns, as I said, and we're doing campaigns on other different websites as well, a little bit of work on Amazon. My co-founder Liam and another one of our business partners is focused on that aspect. Reddit, another one where I'm focusing, but it takes a lot of understanding the intricacies of messaging, what lands in a 10-word hook, in image, what that image should look like, and also like what the journey typically is, not just from a consumer aspect, but also these systems are now run by algorithms. So you have to understand how that content works within the algorithm and how the algorithm looks at ads in your campaign. So we have quite a system that we have going right now where every week we will evaluate different angles that we can take, different concepts that we want to explore. So if that's sustainability, think of a few angles to that. If that's, functionality, health, all of the different value propositions that Yaupon brings. There are so many. It's something that we, in a way, do struggle with sometimes because we want to scream everything from the rooftop, but sometimes it's best just to lead it into little bites and give people, crumbs that eventually lead them to wanting to make a purchase decision. So every week we're doing this sort of iteration, looking across all the different types of formats for advertising. And in some ways, you're like managing a portfolio of messages. And how are you going to sequence them? How are you going to budget into those different things? Where I'm able to think back to some of my past work and also track performance just as I would, my favorite baseball player for my daily fantasy baseball team, which is anybody out there, don't do daily fantasy baseball. It's a bad move. It's going to take over your life. We every week develop 2, I'd say, ad packs where we're looking at all those different concepts, angles, formats, throwing them into a test ad set, which is just the sub level of a campaign in our test campaign. And we just see what works. And so this a little bit of like the name of the game is you have to shed any sort of reservation you have around, wanting to be looked at. Like you can't take yourself seriously. You have to put ads out there that may totally suck, but you need 1,000 impressions to determine that that's the case. And sometimes the ones that you think suck are great. They do great. And then you're like, okay, I guess maybe I'm embarrassed that it's out there, but I need to get rid of that embarrassment and just live with it because it's working, and also find like some pride in that. Okay, like this tapped into something. I may have my own biases around what's good and what's bad. And it's not for me to say what's good and bad. It's for people to say, especially when you're running a business. So being really neutral from that perspective, and while generating these ads, because you may not like the aesthetic of it, you may not like the messaging of it, but if it gets a click, it registers that consumer then is interested in at least your company or concept or something later down the line. Sometimes that's, tapping into a meme format that's really exciting for what you would call like a top of funnel ad. So if you look at advertising like a funnel, you have your top of funnel, which is like initial impression, had no idea the brand existed. That's just wanting to get people's eyes. Middle of funnel, you're starting to get more into your story, the brand itself, the benefits maybe of the product. It really depends on the type of consumer, because some people really just care about the storytelling and journey first. Others are like, show me the product. And maybe they, didn't get the top of funnel ad and they just went straight to the middle of funnel. But a lot of times it's, someone clicked on a dumb meme ad that I put out there, and then I get to, because of that, show them, our more storytelling video ads that are exciting and earnest and real. And so the bottom of funnel is then people that are like about to click purchase and just need like some additional education or messaging in order to make that decision. And all of this is, honest. That's important to us. Like we can be ridiculous in terms of, top of funnel messaging for click, like getting a click. But at the end of the day, you want to be genuine and honest, because that is one, and it's the ethos of our business. But also, I think consumers now are so used to being misled. And it's refreshing, I think, when that doesn't happen. So yeah, that's the basis of it. Now we have, our other campaign, the main one where all the tests, whatever goes right in the test, you move that one ad. So you may be testing like 12, only 1 or 2 might actually make it over to your main campaign. Apologies to anyone out there who's watching the podcast and might start getting some trial top of funnel ads. Bear with me. You'll probably get some good, mid funnel, bottom of funnel as well.
Yeah. That's been good stuff. And I'm glad to hear you talk about the funnel. My marketing class and my Professor Sharif would be pleased to know that I understood what you were talking about, having been taught about it in school. So that's good that the Wharton education is helping out. It's so interesting, man, because you talk about doing what you need to get the click, right? And having, this inner dialogue where, oh man, this is kind of embarrassing or whatever, but you use the term good and all that stuff. But ultimately you brought it all together at the end saying, like, you're always going to be honest. You're always going to be truthful, good or bad, in that context being, hey, this may be more silly than what we really would have preferred to go with, just so we can get more people drawn into the funnel. But ultimately, being honest is absolutely good business. And I think you're spot on with regard to people being misled. And so when they see honesty in a company, I think people are drawn to that. So really stepping back, looking at this thing, you're using like every method that you can when you're being thrifty with your advertising, because you're looking at Instagram, all these different platforms where you can get this stuff out. And then you're casting a wide net at the top of funnel and then getting people, more of the story as they work their way down. So that's really fascinating. I think it's kind of it was enjoyable to walk through that and see, obviously there's so much more to it than we have time to get into right now, it is absolutely attainable for people who are willing to work hard to get the word out with a lot of the modern tools that we have today that didn't exist, even 10 or 15 years ago. The power of Instagram ads, the analytics you can get now are such that with not as much money as tradition, or like way less money than was traditionally required, you can start getting a lot of impressions, to use the term that they're throwing around on a lot of these platforms today. So yeah, that is incredible. One more thing I want to talk about is just how you manage working with your team of three, right? Because you have three co-founders, and we've talked a lot on this show about pure leadership, which can be, in my opinion, a lot more challenging than more of a hierarchical leadership. So can you talk a little bit about your team dynamic and how you guys are able to share the workload and work successful as a team of three co-equal founders?
It's a great question. Especially when you have three people coming from totally different industries, backgrounds, and also all being equally passionate about the product, right? We all have a shared mission, but all of us have different approaches and thoughts and experiences, perspectives. So it helps a lot that we are all friends and have been for quite a while. When we first started building this, a lot of it was just, throwing ideas and just trying to figure out what is either the midpoint of all of those ideas or what most aligns with what we think the product or the company would become. And this is back before we even had a product where, we're just trying, because you don't really know what's going to land until you're actually out on the market. So at that point, it was just, and still is, but very democratic. Here are ideas. Let's be, objective, critical thinkers as to like what the messages that are going to resonate and what we want this thing to be from a values and mission perspective. And marrying the success of it with value and missions is always, I think for any company, even if you're a really mature stage company, it's always a challenge because it's easy to take the path of least resistance in terms of branding. If you think that there's this flash in a pan moment that you can really tap into, which may not be, fully aligned with the values and mission, but threading the needle between that, like how do we tap into that without betraying our values and while honoring, the long history and all of that. There's just a lot of decision making that needs to go into that. So as time's gone on, we've had to, and we've worked together for a lot longer. We've learned a lot about each other's backgrounds and experiences and how that informs people's views. So there's a little bit of like weighting of decisions now, weighting with the T, where it's, this person has this experience. Maybe they understand this aspect of the market or our business better because of that past experience or because of what they're doing hands-on on a day-to-day basis. We are founders, so we all have to wear all hats at all times, but everyone has their strengths, everyone has their weaknesses. And being really honest about those, I think has been a really valuable thing for our business. Liam is just an incredible mind for logistics and understanding supply chains, the complexities of them, managing those relationships and building, long-standing friendships with those people. And that's just been so integral to our business, especially, with route planning and pricing for JetBlue. He's so talented at building our financial models, which you guys say, I'm from Wall Street. Why is Liam managing the financial models? It's just, it's skill sets. I was picking methods for investing in public equities, and Liam's managing like the exact nitty gritty budgets of a plane's route and the impact that has on the business. And so he's just been so immensely valuable for that. Jeffrey has just the best taste, creatively speaking, is, definitely a different perspective than Liam and I, who are in, more of the corporate world. Jeffrey was in the commercial art world for a little bit before going to get his master's degrees. But that perspective has been so valuable because when you spend a lot of time in the corporate world, you just have a different approach to what success looks like and what, and the things that you need to do to get there, and being able to like take a step back and say, okay, let's focus on, the long-term brand building, community management, in the relationships with our different vendors and all of the things like that. Even just communication with our customers. Jeffrey's just been fantastic. And then for me, I'm very focused on, again, the sustainability aspects of it, but going out and communicating the messaging, tapping into a little bit of the PR experience that I got on Wall Street, and then getting people really, really passionate about this product. Marketing, of course, sort of is a natural flow because you have to managing the performance of all of that and what the messaging does from a sales and click through cost per click all of those different things. And then I'm just a very passionate person. I fully pour myself into every single thing I do. For me, being able to work on that messaging, I don't know, it's hard to describe. It's just this inner energy where I just want to yell about Yaupon from the rooftops to get everybody so excited and into it. And that's been great. And doing that on the boots on the ground too, totally new experience for me. I love going into these stores and talking to everybody there about the plant, getting people enthusiastic. And yeah, that's how we've ended up splitting up our responsibilities sort of around that. But at the same time, everybody's wearing all hats. There's obviously always there's always going to be disagreements, but it's how do you get through those disagreements in a way that is respectful, in a way that honors, different perspectives and experience. And I think we're doing a really good job at that. And I credit my co-founders for that.
Dude, that is such a fantastic breakdown of the way your team works. And there's so much to draw from that I think is so helpful for anybody in any team setting. But I think particularly for folks who are starting something with close friends or with people with whom you're going to have to work side by side so closely like co-founders would. And I think it's interesting because as you went through that, there was like a nice arc to it where we talked initially about how you guys are taking a more democratic approach. And then you talked about honoring each other's perspectives, how each person has their own background that is a force multiplier for your team, but then how you all wear all hats all the times. And so I think why that's so important is because, if you just say, okay, this guy's in charge of logistics, like I'm not going to think about it. You're ceding so much responsibility there and you're just ratcheting up the tension on that one person and the pressure on that one person. Like I think in a setting that you find yourself in, it's so powerful to have overlap and have everybody, if you're going to do this democratic thing, have everybody understand what's going on in the business while also understanding people have different strengths. And so that's a major point as well. In any team you have, but especially in a small team, understanding everybody's perspective, understanding where they're coming from and understanding their strengths and weaknesses is absolutely critical to having a successful team. And it's so awesome to hear that you guys are doing it in a way that allows you all to maintain this equal piece of the pie as co-founders, but also, not let everybody stay in a specific lane. So that way, instead of having 3 co-equal lanes running side by side, you're more of like a lattice framework where you can actually back each other up. And when someone makes a mistake, you can pick them up. And if you cede responsibility for certain areas, which of course that's another way of doing business, there are weaknesses associated with that. And I think without a larger team or other members of the team to help back each other up, I think it's so powerful to have that kind of overlapping responsibility situation. And then the final thing I'll say that's just so obvious is that the level of trust you guys have is absolutely critical. If you guys have so much on your plate, you're starting this company, being able to rely on the other person to pull his weight into, to finish a problem for you is so critical. And, you can't do everything yourself. And so being able to trust your team is so huge. And then I know I said it would be the last thing, but I think, the passion that you guys bring, right? Like you talked about, it's just so clear to me that there's no way that any of these young companies or all the stories you've heard about every single successful startup that has grown into a very successful company, it's been this incredible passion and belief that pulses through the founders that actually helps you drive it home. And so it's really exciting to hear that you all share that and that you're bringing that to bear to your team, because it's the only way it's going to work. You can't rely on the inertia of a massive bureaucracy to carry the ball forward when you want to take a day off. So it's a ton of work doing this startup thing, but it's also super cool to see you guys getting after it and succeeding. And it's incredibly motivating for me as someone who's in business school. And of course, I think will be motivating to a lot of people who are listening to this, whether they're folks getting out of the military or whether they're, other people looking at potentially changing lanes. So thank you so much for sharing that story and everything we just talked about. Before we go, I'm going to do, we're just going to ask a couple more questions. What is something or a habit or a belief that you've had to shake off or get rid of as you've transitioned out of finance?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And there are a lot of directions I could take that in. I think there are 2 main things. The first would be let go. Always look forward and look back for experience, ideas, perspective. And also, like, when you need motivation, remember who you are, what your past successes are. And even if you don't have past successes, like, or even if you don't think you have past successes, you do. Think about the people you interact with, how those interactions went, who's in your life, why they're in your life. All of these things are for a reason. And if you're able to let go of the parts of your past that are, as you said, your things that sort of shape your identity, and be able to say, I am my identity. It's not what I was. It's not what people think I'm going to be, or it's not what anybody thinks. It's you. And you sort of think of yourself as just like yourself in a vacuum. That's the reality. You are yourself. And by letting go of all of those things, and also letting go of, you're free. And you're free to really drive forward whatever you believe in. It doesn't even have to be something that involves putting money into it. It's just about the way you approach life, the way that you talk to people, listen to perspectives, listen to people's ideas. Everybody's idea is worth something. And when you can let go, and it's no longer about you and who you thought you were, who other people think you are, everything opens up. Everything opens up. And I'm not like a particularly spiritual person, but so I say that before I use the word karma, but like, it comes back to when you let go and you start to open up because of that, the karma comes back in a really positive way. And then, I guess I sort of already touched on it, but like self-doubt, just believe in yourself, be competitive. Every day is you doing the things that you need to do to take a step forward. And even if you take a step back some days, it's not because of anything other than you tried. And that's okay. You can continue to try, continue to believe in yourself, and things are probably going to go okay. And even if it doesn't seemingly go okay in that moment, maybe that's for a reason in the long term. Like leaving finance, I was really worried about like the future of my life, spent so much time thinking that would be my path. And just, as I said, opening up and losing the self-doubt every day is a positive for me. And it's just changed my life. And I feel emotional even saying it, but it's just been so great. And I get to be here today talking to you, Bubba. Like I wouldn't be here talking to you and learning about your experience, your life, getting to talk to people that are interested in this sort of stuff without that. So I'm just so grateful, and I'm grateful for you and this conversation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so awesome, man. And yeah, in a world where I think Wall Street, business school, I mean, even in the military, there's this golden path, and there's so much pressure to do what is expected for someone in your position to do, or do what maybe a mentor wants you to do. We talk a ton about the importance of mentorship and the power that it brings. But also ultimately, you gotta make the decisions for yourself, and you gotta go after what you're interested in. And if that's off the beaten path, then so be it. Because like we talked about here, and like we've talked about in a lot of other episodes, where you follow your passion, that's where you really will find success, and so that's super exciting. So we kind of hit on this, but if there is a single leadership trait that you would encourage other people who are looking to start their own company, or other founders, if there's a single leadership trait for them to work on and pursue growth in, what would it be?
Wanting to be wrong. Having a point of view and being willing to have your mind changed is the strongest leadership trait I think there is. It changes your dynamic with other people around you, because you're not questioning, you're asking for new information to change your mind. You're opening your own mind up. You're exploring new ideas. You're no longer attached to anything beyond facts and perspectives. And so if you approach leadership by wanting to have your mind changed, instead of being a defensive around, your already existing views, I think it's pretty transformative to approach things that way.
Yeah, that's great, man. That's so interesting. And it totally fits in your general theme of mindset, right? You talked a lot about having a positive mindset and identifying the areas of each situation, whether it's negative or good, and see the good in it. And so that one shift in mindset, whether it, in this case, hoping that somebody can prove you wrong, looking and seeking for someone to change your mind, can be a powerful tool. I think that's a really awesome answer. And then finally, if people want to learn more about Goldholly, or if they're jonesing to take a sip of this stuff, where can they go to find more information?
Yeah, check us out at goldholly.com. We have a lot of good information on our blog page. Our products are right there in the store. Follow us on your favorite social media. The handle is Drink Goldholly. A lot of good content going up there. Nice little discount here. If anybody can remember, upgrade 15. If you use that in our store, you get 15% off. Free shipping for orders $30 or more. I'll tell you, I love our light roast, and I love our dark roast. So we have 3 roasts. A lot of people love the medium roast too. It's a little bit on the smokier side. I'm not like a mezcal smoky foods guy. Light roast, dark roast, it's all I drink. Gives you the energy you need. And I really think if your listeners out there give it a shot, you'll find something you like. We all love it. And check us out and subscribe to our email list. Happy to answer any questions too. If anybody wants to DM us on our social account or reach out to our about email.
Andrew Little of Goldholly, thank you so much for joining us on the show, and thanks for sharing the path, what you were doing before, and then ultimately the path to founding your own Yaupon Holly company with 2 other co-founders. It was great having you on, learned a ton, and I think there are other people, myself included, who are looking forward to brewing some American caffeinated beverage going forward. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bubba. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for listening to Lead with Bubba Scott. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the show and leave a rating or review wherever you find your podcasts. You can also follow along on Instagram at Lead with Bubba and let us know your thoughts on the episode. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.